Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's been so long since I've seen you guys last, and I definitely missed you guys, and I'm so sorry I haven't had any new content in a while. My life has just been super crazy and hectic, a lot of changes, and I've had to just deal with that first before I can focus on making new great content for you guys. But I'm back now and I have a lot of stuff coming your way. Make sure to share, like, and subscribe, okay? Because that really helps me to expand my content and have the ability to keep making more and more content for you guys. So subscribe. So today I'm going to revisit the 2022 market in terms of what the cost of living in Seattle is and what it's really like to move here now. Because I know a lot has changed since COVID starting to wrap up, and that means the numbers and the affordability, complex stuff like that changed too. And I want to make sure that you guys have a clear understanding of what the costs really are, especially if you're just now moving here versus last year. So today we're going to focus on that, and I'm also going to be comparing Seattle to some really popular and great options in neighboring areas around Seattle. I know you guys have asked about Bellevue quite a bit, so I'm going to do that today, and I'm also going to add Lynwood, which is a super major favorite of most people who are living here already or also moving here. And I think what's really important is also to compare the prices relative to each other so that you guys have a great idea of what it really costs to live in these areas, because sometimes the rent is cheaper but the cost of food or getting other stuff is more expensive, and vice versa. So I want to make sure you guys have a full picture and a great idea of what it's looking like right now in Seattle and neighboring areas around it. So let's get started. But before we dive into the numbers and the details of each of the areas, I want to talk about the culture, the vibe, and the characteristics of each of these areas, because I think it's very important we know exactly where we're moving to. It's not just about pricing, right? Sometimes you're willing to pay a little bit more to be in the area that you feel like you are going to connect more with and enjoy living in. So let's get started on that first. All right, so let's start with Seattle. It's gonna be fairly simple and straightforward and brief in this video, just because I've talked so much about Seattle. I'm sure you guys are tired of me talking about Seattle by now. If you follow me, you know where to look for those videos. If you're new, then check out one of my other videos that I've talked about Seattle in, and you will be completely filled up on Seattle from that. But overall, Seattle is a big city, but it's not at the same time. So I think if I had to describe Seattle in a nutshell, I would say that it has a little of everything, but not too much of everything. You're gonna be able to find whatever you need, and it's gonna be in the city. It's gonna be very close and accessible. Public transportation is really good. You have the nightlife, you have bars, you have clubs, you have shopping, you have everything you need. You have workplaces. There's a ton of companies you can work for in Seattle. You have the ocean right next to you. You have a lot of parks. You have a lot of recreational activities in the city. So that's Seattle. You're gonna find everything you need. It's not New York, but it's also not a very small city either. So you're gonna have that metropolitan feel and a lot of the cultures that come along with that. But you're not gonna have like the crazy partying that you would see in LA or Miami or New York, right? There's just enough of everything. So that's Seattle in a nutshell. And I know you guys keep asking me about the homeless and the safety and all the stuff that Seattle's been in the news for in the last couple years. And yeah, there's all of that. There's crime, there's homelessness, there is all sorts of things that other cities are seeing, especially major cities. But the difference in Seattle now is that it's getting cleaned up quite a bit. The new mayor has come in, and they are going to be beefing up the security aspects of the city. They are now targeting repeat offenders, people who are shoplifting or, robbing businesses or stealing or being, a menace to society pretty much. Basically what's going to be happening going forward is that a lot of the security measures will be beefed up, and you won't be able to get away with some of the stuff that you've been able to get away with in the past. For instance, people who have a long record sheet of, petty crimes and robbery and theft and things like that, they're not going to be able to come in and out of jail quickly. They're going to be sitting in jail for a while, and they're going to be going through a more rigorous process of rehabilitation than what they've seen in the past. And I've definitely seen an improvement. For a little while there, even I would say last winter, it was getting pretty bad. But now, in the last, I'd say couple months, it's been a lot better. My packages haven't been stolen as often. I don't see as many homeless people out there. A lot of the people who need help are getting help. There's still people out there that are homeless, but it's not on the caliber that we've been seeing last year. But like I've said before, Seattle is a major city and it's going to have its problems. And I think if you are in the mindset to move to a major city, you kind of have to accept that it's not going to be quiet and peaceful and laid back like a suburb or a very, very small town. There's always going to be a little risk of living in a major city. And that's something that I think we all need to recognize. And those of us who've lived here in Seattle for a long time, it's hard to because Seattle was a sleepy town before and it's no longer a sleepy town. It is a major global city. So I've had to learn to adjust that and accept that. And I still think overall, I appreciate all Seattle has to offer. All right, now on to the other areas that I'd love to talk to you about today. A lot of you guys have asked about Bellevue. I don't know if you guys have heard, but there was an article that came out that the average housing price in Bellevue now is higher than Manhattan, which sounds really crazy, right? Because it's New York, it's Manhattan, like nothing is crazier than that. So this random town in the Pacific Northwest is all of a sudden more expensive than Manhattan. How could that be? I want to make you guys really aware that that is true and it's not at the same time. Because what you're getting for that average price in Bellevue is tremendously more than what you would get in Manhattan. In Manhattan, you're getting like a shoebox for that average price. In Bellevue, you're getting a nice house with a nice yard, and those are two different things completely. So Bellevue is Seattle's sister city pretty much. The two cities are connected by two bridges across Lake Washington, and there are a ton of nice homes around this lake, and Bellevue is no exception. Bellevue has this reputation for being extremely expensive, and it's true in certain areas of Bellevue, like Medina, which is technically Bellevue, but it's its own thing, or Clyde Hill. But when you go further out east into Bellevue, it becomes more and more affordable. Affordable comparable to, what we're paying here in the greater Seattle area. Not necessarily affordable compared to the rest of America. But Bellevue is a great option for people with families and kids because they have amazing schools and they have really good amenities and it has everything that you need in it. Bellevue has a downtown area with a lot of companies there, a lot of tech companies and a shopping center and all sorts of things like restaurants and things like that. It looks super metropolitan, at least as of now, but really it's kind of sleepy. I think that Bellevue after a certain hour of a day, on average throughout the week, it's pretty quiet. It's not hustle bustle. It doesn't feel fast paced. On the weekends, at nights, it could be a little bit more, upbeat just because there are a couple clubs and bars there. But overall, I would classify Bellevue as more of a hybrid between a small developing metropolitan and a suburb. What you would typically find in smaller cities in the Midwest, right? Like, Indianapolis or St. Louis, where there's some nightlife and it looks somewhat metropolitan, but it's definitely not New York. So let's talk about the rental market in Bellevue versus Seattle. This is where things get a little bit interesting. So if you are looking for a one bedroom inside of city center of Bellevue, which is more the metropolitan parts of Bellevue, near to Medina and Clyde Hill and downtown Bellevue, it's actually 6% more expensive to live there than in the center of downtown Seattle. So that's where it gets really interesting. And then when you go to the suburbs of Bellevue versus the suburbs of Seattle, Bellevue's cost of rent there skyrocket to 16% more than suburbs of Seattle. So as you can see, Bellevue is not the cheaper option. A lot of it is driven by the fact that Bellevue has a lot of high wealth individuals with families, and they're looking for great schools and great neighborhoods for their kids. And naturally, people by the time they have kids and are looking for suburban lifestyles and caring about schools, they're making a lot more money than folks who are just out of college and who don't care or need those things. So that's why Bellevue's prices have been driven up, because those high wealth individuals with higher incomes and further along in their careers are starting to move to Bellevue, even if they work in downtown. But if they work in downtown Bellevue, then it totally makes sense for them to live in Bellevue. And so that's why you're seeing a lot of Bellevue prices skyrocket. And it's no longer an affordable option to living in Seattle. You will also see that as the number of rooms in your rental increases though, Bellevue becomes a little bit cheaper. So a 3-bedroom apartment in Bellevue is a little bit cheaper than Seattle, just because Seattle doesn't have a lot of 3-bedrooms. And frankly, when Seattle does have a 3-bedroom, it's super expensive because it's really hard to find. So Bellevue has more suburban layouts and land, so there's a lot more 3-bedroom apartments, and that becomes a supply and demand situation where it then becomes cheaper because there's more supply. But here's the big key determination. Even though rent is higher in Bellevue, the other cost of living is lower, anywhere from 3 to 5% lower in comparison to Seattle. That means consumer goods like groceries and clothing, and also eating out is a little bit cheaper in Bellevue than Seattle. So I think that's where it becomes kind of a balancing act, right? But at the same time, I do think that Seattle still has really affordable options, and Bellevue also has really expensive options. So it just comes down now to what the vibe and the culture you want is. And like I mentioned before, Bellevue doesn't have a big city vibe. It doesn't have the fast-pacedness of a metropolitan city. And so when you're young and you're looking for that, Bellevue might not be the best choice. But as I've always mentioned, Bellevue is very close to Seattle. It's probably like a 5-7 minute drive across the bridge from Bellevue to Seattle if you're living in downtown Bellevue. If you're living in the suburb, it's more like 10-15 minutes drive, without traffic that is. But there's a lot of light rail that is being built to connect Bellevue and Seattle. So if you live near a light rail station in Bellevue, it'll be a great option, right? You can get into Seattle fairly quickly and still be able to interact with the vibes and scene in Seattle, and be able to live somewhere that maybe fit you more appropriately when it comes to budget. Because I think that you still can find some affordable living situations in Bellevue. You just have to live further out. And then, take the light rail in or drive in for the activities in Seattle. All right, so let's now talk about Lynwood. Lynwood is kind of the new star in the scene because it's the up-and-coming area that has blown up since right before COVID because of its affordability, competitive edge, and also the fact that it's very easy to get from Lynwood into the city. It's only about 15 to 17 miles out of the city. So that means it's a quick drive in the city if there's no traffic, 15-20 minutes. If there's traffic, it's more closer to about 40 minutes, 45 minutes. But Lynwood also has a lot of public transportation leading into the city from Lynwood. And it's getting its own light rail station, which is going to be a major game changer for anyone who's looking for a budget area that is also accessible to downtown Seattle. So the cost of Lynwood has skyrocketed also, comparable to what it used to be. I actually grew up in Lynwood, and I lived there for pretty much most of my later childhood, so middle school and high school. And it was pretty small. There was really not much there other than the mall and the basic grocery stores and amenities. But in the recent years, it's just blown up. A lot of Amazonians, a lot of people who work for Microsoft or other tech companies like Facebook or Apple that work downtown or work in downtown Seattle or downtown Bellevue or Redmond have now opted to move to Lynwood because it's much more affordable and it still has all the amenities and access to both areas. All right, guys, so this is the key factor for why Lynwood is so attractive to people. Rent in Lynwood is anywhere from about 18% to 27%-ish cheaper than Seattle. It's about 27% cheaper than Seattle in comparison to downtown Lynwood and downtown Seattle. In the outskirts of Lynwood, it's about like 18% cheaper than the outskirts of Seattle, which is major. And it's cheaper across the board, both in 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom apartments in general. So a lot of people are moving to Lynwood for that key factor right there. Lynwood is definitely not as metropolitan as even Bellevue. It has very few high rises. It has some, but very few. I think in the future, Lynwood will be developing very similar to how Bellevue has developed over the last 10, 15 years. There is a mindset of Seattle developers and the greater Seattle developers to turn Lynwood, Bellevue, and downtown Seattle into an economic triangle, meaning it'll be a greater Seattle area involving those three specific areas. The reason why I know this is because I've seen the city plans that Lynwood has sent out to all the residents around Lynwood. And that plan had been instated probably almost 20 years ago, but because of the first recession and then the whole COVID crises and all that, it's been delayed quite a bit. But the plan is to make Lynwood the next downtown Bellevue, bringing in businesses, bringing in a lot of residential and big and small businesses, I should clarify, to make Lynwood the next leg of the greater Seattle metropolitan area. And if you look at Lynwood now versus Lynwood 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, you'll see it's grown quite a bit. Prices in Lynwood in early 2000 for a brand new construction in the city center was around $230,000, $220,000. A new construction in downtown Lynwood now is closer to 1.3 mil. And even older homes now on average are going anywhere from $500,000 to $600,000. And those are homes that are needing some repair and some work. So as you can see, the cost of living in Lynwood has increased a lot too. But the rent is still fairly affordable. You can get a one bedroom on average in Lynwood for about $1,500, which is much more affordable than Bellevue or Seattle, which the average one bedroom now in those areas are around $2,000. So as you can see, Lynwood has been a very popular and big target for people who are buying their first homes or, just moving to the city and getting their foot stabilized and can't necessarily afford a $2,000 rent living in the city, but want to be accessible and be able to get to work and get to Seattle fairly easily. Part of what's driving Lynwood's cost also is that it's very close to Boeing. Boeing has a kind of manufacturing plant where a lot of their engineers and a lot of their blue-collar workers, the people who are the mechanics that build the parts and do stuff like that, work. And it's in South Everett on the border of Lynwood and Everett. And that's why Lynwood has gotten so popular. It's also right in the middle of Bellevue and Seattle. It's the same distance from both areas. So a lot of couples who work in those two cities love living in Lynwood for the easy accessibility. Similar to Bellevue, Lynwood is also very, very suburban. It is a great area for families. It's very safe. It has everything you need, all the amenities, and it's starting to get a lot more bars and restaurants and fine dining and things like that. It's starting to develop. The shopping mall there is huge. It's not as high end as downtown shopping or Bellevue shopping, but I can see it one day becoming that way as Lynwood is seeing a lot more high-end furniture shops and more high-end, one-off kind of stores coming into the area. So it is definitely a developing, and I wouldn't say gentrifying because it was never an area that was low income, but it's definitely getting on up there in its bougie points. I forgot to mention earlier that when I made my previous videos, Seattle was pretty affordable due to the COVID effects of people moving out of the city and working remotely. People didn't choose to live in the city anymore, so the cost of living dipped drastically. But from this time last year until now, the cost of living in Seattle in terms of rent, the average rent has gone up probably 22, almost 23%. That's a sizable amount. That's pretty much back to what it was previous to COVID, and maybe a little bit more, 1 or 2% more. But if you're looking from month to month, from last month and this month, it's actually dipped down a little over 2% from last month to this month. So I'm seeing that the rent prices is adjusting again because we had this influx of people moving back into the city for work and looking for apartments. But now that they're all back and then more and more apartments are finishing up construction, there's going to be more supply, which I think is what's bringing the price down a little bit. I know for a fact that there are probably 4 or 5 more additional major apartment projects in Seattle that are not completely done yet and haven't been released to the market. So I imagine that because supply is going to go up, the prices are probably going to drop a little bit more. Same thing with Bellevue too. Bellevue is seeing similar things because there's more apartments being built there. They're just not done yet. So the supply is more limited. But I think Seattle as a whole, over the next 4 or 5 years, it will definitely get more expensive, just like any other city and in any other era. But the rate of increase of rent is probably going to slow down a little bit because there's going to be more supply of rentals going forward. But before I leave you, I want to make sure that you guys are aware that even if things look crazy, I think if you really want to be here and there's a purpose for you to be here, you can make it happen. There will be some concessions you'll have to make, like you won't be able to live in certain areas or others, but you will always be able to find what you need and at the price point you need, because there's a huge variation of prices even in Seattle and in Bellevue and in Lynwood and all these areas I've mentioned. Just because the average price is a certain amount, it does not mean that all prices are at that amount. You just have to look and search for it and take the time and initiative to hunt and be ready to pounce on it as soon as you find a good deal. And why I say that and why I can confidently say that is because I have a friend who's renting a two bedroom, 3 bedroom actually, house, single family house right in the middle of the city, in the central district near Chinatown for $1,000 a month. It's not like a brand new construction or whatever, but I think that if you're realistic about what you want and you're here for a goal and a purpose and you need to find a place to live, you can find a place to live. It's not impossible to find a place to live at all sorts of budgets in the city. You just have to adjust your mindset. I've had to live in conditions where it wasn't ideal for me, but when I came in, I remade that space into something that was more charming and acceptable and fit what I needed at that time and at that budget. And I think that that's a mindset that everyone needs to have going forward. Think of life as taking one step at a time, right? There are goals that we want and living situations that are ideal to us, but at certain parts of our lives, we're not quite there yet. I've had to rent, a random shed room / ADU with a random small bathroom and had to live in there for 6 months to build my career at that point in time. And that's what I could afford at that time. And over time, I've progressed. And if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have put myself in the city or in the area I needed to be able to build my career. So don't be afraid of a little bit of hardship and being flexible. When you move to a major city and you're just starting out, you're going to have to face those things. And those of us who have the grit and the dedication and the motivation to fight through it are going to get what they want at the end of the day. So of course, I gotta rank what I personally would choose between the 3 areas, right? This doesn't mean that it's what you should choose. This is just from my perspective and what I need in life. I definitely would choose Seattle first because I think that it has everything I need, the culture, the vibe, the amenities. It's close to my work. It's close to everything that I need to do every day. Second would be Bellevue. The reason why I chose Bellevue second is because at this point, I'm not looking for an ultra suburb, and I'm looking to be closer to a lot of activity throughout the day. I'm very busy, so I can't just drive back and forth to do things and hang out with people or see people. So I think that's why Seattle kind of tips over Bellevue for me at this point. And then Lynwood would be third for me, just because Lynwood is a little bit further out. It has a little bit less of what I need at this point in my life, and to get into the city, it takes a little bit more time. But overall, I do think that Bellevue and Seattle have very similar amenities, and I think that depending on who you are as a person, what you're looking for, either of those could be fine. Getting back and forth shouldn't be too hard. And then Lynwood is going to get its light rail station in, I believe, 2024, so very soon after. So any of those are going to be good options. I think what's the biggest determination is where you can afford and what culture and vibe you want. And then you got to just balance those things out, right? Because we can't always afford what we ultimately want, but we can compromise one area for another. And that's a decision you'll have to make for yourself. All right, well, that's it for this video, guys. Thank you for watching. And for those who've already subscribed and continue to follow me, thank you so much. You guys are a great deal of motivation for me to continue to do this and make more and more greater content. For those who have not followed me yet, make sure to subscribe, share, and like my content. I would love to see you guys back again. And once again, thank you and see you next time.